So track 10, which is entitled "A Journey Within," is actually the instrumental
For Deep.
For Deep, an instrumental version of Deep. And when Deep was brought to me, it was brought to me as a completely different song. So I said, this is really nice. I like the song, but it had a bit of a country feel. I'm like, this is not really going to vibe with where we're going with this album. Mm-hmm. So I said, give me the lyrics and I'll write, a new piece.
So he did a completely new piece for the song Deep.
So the actual piece that I wrote, the composition, is actually A Journey Within.
Yes.
And so when I was building this version of Deep in an instrumental section, I was saying to myself, how did I want this to go? And so I was just playing the chord sections and listening very, very carefully. All of a sudden, it inspired me to kind of go in a certain direction. I could feel this sort of waltz vibe coming. There's this. You can hear this sort of choir humming in the background, and that was the inspiration for the rest of the instrumental. And in my mind, I could hear I needed some sort of a rhythm to sort of roll through the song. So I brought in the harp that you hear that adds and sort of builds up the sort of flow of the song. It's kind of like the what do you call it? The river, they call it the current. It's the current of the song, and it's carrying it through. And of course, the waltzes have this sort of waviness, back and forth, sort of rocking through the song. So that helped as well. And immediately I knew it's got to have a violin. This song has got to have a violin. So I wrote, the violin line as well, became also the vocal line. But when I had to go back and do the violin part, I had actually had a slightly different violin part in my mind when I was writing the instrumental.
Because you didn't want it to be exactly the same as the song. You wanted to give it its own special sweetness as an instrumental.
And actually, when I actually wrote the instrumental, I actually had the violin line in my mind. I was like, okay, the violin would actually do this, but Lindsey really should do this because the words are this. But when I was free to do the instrumental, the violin could do what I heard in my head for the violin. So I let the violin speak a lot more. And I tried to write for the violin on the violin line. What would a violin player do with this? Would they come in like the vocalist? No, they wouldn't. They would do it this way. So when you listen to the instrumental for this instrumental version of Deep, and I actually think it's its own song because the violin takes a slightly different journey through the passage. And we brought in a Russian violinist, Maria, who did a sensational job.
Can you say her full name?
It's a Russian name, so I have to say it slowly. Grigorieva, and she's from St. Petersburg, and she's phenomenal. And she did it so quickly. I wrote all these little nuances that I wanted.
She was great.
Every little nuance she nailed exactly the way I wanted. I was like ecstatic when I got back, the track from her. I was just like, yes, this is what I wanted. As the song progressed through to the breakdown, there's like a little instrument in the Deep version of it. There's an instrumental section with winds because in Deep I wanted some relief from the rest of the song, do something different. And
so Deep, whenever we're saying Deep, in case you haven't watched the other discussions of the other songs,
it's the first song on the album.
Deep is the first song on the album, and it's the vocal version of this song.
In the breakdown. In Deep, there's actually an opal part, and it was my favorite part that I wrote for it, and it interacts with the flute and a high flute, and they're kind of playing. They're kind of like the instruments are kind of playing with each other. In the sense they're tag teaming in that section, and I was like, okay, so how am I going to bring in the violin through this section? And so I actually decided maybe I'll just have it weave. So that's why you hear the weaving violin and viola all through that section. And then at the end, I had, I really wanted the violin to shine. And the violin can shine really beautiful if you take it really high.
I love it.
And you just rip it up high. And at the very end, you just have that very soft, long note on a violin. It's something only a violin can do that beautifully.
And Maria did it beautifully.
Oh, she just nailed it. She absolutely nailed it. And so I was very, very happy, extremely happy with the way this song happened. Also, at the end of the song, I kind of changed the feel at the very end because there were no vocals there, and it was a violin, so the violin had to say had to speak the emotional part there because it didn't have the words. So when it was behind deep, it could just sort of lay back and support, but not on its own. So it had to have an emotional line. So you'll hear the line, the violin line at the end of Journey Within. It speaks more emotionally through that section, and man, I'm so happy the way it turned out. It turned out so great.
And the instrumentals on the album, they're beautiful as individual pieces on their own, and kind of like breathing spaces between all the other songs. So Sean had wanted to do more instrumentals for the album, but
we ran out of time.
We ran out of time for our radio promoters, so we kind of ended it a bit shorter than we originally planned. But Sean is great at doing instrumentals, and we look forward to having more on the next album.
Absolutely.
And so we really hope that you enjoy this one. I certainly love it.